Welcome back to the video lecture series, Culture, Worldview, and Origins. We're Tim and Holly Nyquist. This topic is on critical thinking skills in science. This is chapter 2, which is on culture, and this is video number 2 of culture. We're looking at different factors of how cultures can influence thinking processes. And this is another area which is very important in communicating, in that number 4 is called the locus of authority. Is that where is that center of authority? And authority to think, to make decisions, and to act upon them. Where is that authority? Where does that authority reside? The Western tendency is that authority is internal. It's within each person. That's why we have the Western society is training their members to be autonomous, to be independent, to think for themselves, and to even critically think. So this is where we're at, is that Western cultural tendency is that locus of authority is internal, is the person themselves doesn't need to consult outside sources as the authority. The person can consult or reflect within and can make judgments, can make calls, and make decisions and go with that. That is the Western tendency is self-responsible. Self is the center point. It's basically very self-centered. Non-Western tendency is the locus of authority is external to the person. Locus of authority can be a person in authority. It can be a religion. It can be a god. It can be a community figure. It can be the father figure within the family. Whichever it is, that locus of authority is external to the person, and the person has no rights, no power to make decisions autonomously. They will always maybe consider the options and then go and ask that authority what they thought, or for permission to be able to go in that direction. So that is a non-Western tendency, is external authority. The authority is not internal, it is external to them, and it's others that are responsible, because they only react and obey the authority that is above them. And so they don't usually take direct responsibility, because they are followers completing the wishes of the authority over them. Whereas in the Western world, it's kind of like, no, they are very autonomous, they are self-responsible, and it is up to them to make the decisions and to make the correct ones. The authority structure, based on the locus of authority that is internal or external, there is an authority structure within the society, within the community. And the Western tendency is self-independent. And that authority structure, again, is within the person, and that person is autonomous from all other persons. So that person can glide through downtown autonomously, independently, and they don't even recognize maybe other units, other people. They are autonomous, and that's the way they are trained, and that's the way they live. Whereas the non-Western tendency is other dependent, and it is based on community and the authority within that community, and they are submissive or subjective to that authority and to that power. The two terms, Western tendency of self-independent, is autonomous and competitive. And so if we're autonomous units, then it's us against everyone else. And if it's limited goods or whatever, we are in a battle to climb the corporate ladder, to get to the top, because everyone else is striving to get to the same area. And so we are trained to be competitive. And so everything we do is often competitively based, whereas in the non-Western world, being community-centered, it is cooperative based. It is not competitive. It is not competing autonomously one against the other. It's in a cooperative in bringing the whole family up, bringing the whole community up together. Nobody tries to stand up above everyone else. Everybody is equal, or bringing everybody up together to the same level. These are quite different qualities. These are quite different ideas to embrace when you're talking about a classroom. Or trying to get the best grades, or get to motivate, is that there is different motivations for what they do based on what cultural tendency they actually have. This one here is one of the focuses of my research, which was on the cognitive processing type, in that we have two major different ways of processing information or processing input. And one, the Western tendency, tends to be through auditory processing. That is through listening. And that is what the Western educational system is built on, is auditory processing, which that is where we get the lecture mode of lecturing to the students, and they're hearing and processing what the teacher has to say. The other mode is through reading and writing. Reading is interesting because there are different ways to read. The preferred Western tendency for auditory processing is through phonetics, is breaking the words down into syllables and listening for the differences. And that way we can compose new words by rearranging the syllables. And so it's kind of like the way that we process information enables us to do different things cognitively. In other words, if we're trained phonetically to break things down into sound bites, then our mind is conditioned or is equipped to break things down to analyze. Whereas the other tendency, non-Western tendency, tend to be visual processors, and I almost am thinking this is more innate tendency to be a visual processor. And when we present a visual processor with a book, without a lot of instruction, the visual processor will see outlines and forms, and they don't necessarily see words. And so what they are taught is how to recognize the outline of this word visually and that what it sounds like. So they aren't taught to analyze or to phonetically take apart a word. They're taught what a word looks like, and that this is what it sounds like. And so if they come across a word that they don't know yet, there's no way to sound it out. But what they can do is look at the visual context of the word and to see and guess at what that word might mean according to its context. So there are visual processors and there are auditory processors. There's been some interesting studies done in the cognitive sciences of mapping or actually showing what is illuminating in people's minds when they read. And if they're an auditory processor, they will actually read out loud in their mind. They hear a voice processing the information. And they may even read pictures auditorily, processing it through words, descriptions, and they'll hear this voice. Whereas the visual processor will try to read words visually, and they will come up with ideas or sounds of what this visual representation means. And that's what I did not understand. I did not understand that there were visual processors that approached a technical book trying to understand it through visual processing. And that's what one of my students commented in a survey, in that your tests are too hard and you don't give us enough time, because I have to take your written question and I have to process it into a visual, into a picture, to understand what you want. And then I come up with the answer, but my answer is visual. And so then I have to but you want it written down, so then I have to put my visual back into words. And so it's almost a 2 to 3 different method of translation that goes on for each question. And they said, I don't give enough time to be able to do all that work. And so that was amazing to me. So cognitive processing type, the Western tendency tends to be an auditory processor. And I think auditory processing enables us to do certain mathematics, to do certain areas of critical thinking, to do certain areas of analysis, because our brain has been exercised in a way. Whereas the visual processors are very much alive and in full color, and they see things differently. And sometimes I think our black and white world can use some more color. Type of logic, number 7. This is important too to understand, is that if I have a certain way of processing information, then I also have a way of looking at things logically, how to do logic. The Western tendency is to hear things in a linear, because information goes in through the ear ducts and it's linear. We can't listen to multiple sources of communication at once. We pick one and it's linear. And if it's linear, it's sequential. And if it's sequential, it's systematic. And so everything is lined up. So auditory processors tend to be very linear in their thinking, very sequential, one after the other, and very systematic, which makes things predictable, based on cause and effect, which gives us a uniformitarian mindset of thinking. The non-Western tendency is block. What's that mean? Well, it's a block that means something. This block means something. Full picture. Okay, so let's go back to block. For example, we might say one block, God is love. Another block, God is just. God is holy. And so in a linear system, a linear sequential person would say, how could a loving God send anybody to hell, condemn anybody? Because that's not love. Whereas in the block thinking, God is love, that is true. But God is holy also. And if you violate his holiness and his justice, then he will punish that. And that does not violate his love, because his God is love is another block. And those blocks are held in tension. And so that's how our different types of logic will affect how we think doctrinally, how we think theologically. So the non-Western tendency is block thinking. It's full picture, full color. It's multiple relationships. It's unpredictable, and it's non-uniform. And so that is the kind of the logic that a non-Westerner, their world is full of. Whereas in the Western tendency, like I said before, it's linear, systematic, sequential, predictable. And you see any differences? And how do we expect those two types of logic to be able to work in the same school system? And when we ask of things to do, we say, I want you to summarize this reading. And the non-Western would say, what do you mean summarize? They got the full picture. How do you reduce a picture? How do you cut and how do you reduce a picture? Whereas the other one, because everything is bit in pieces, it's already in pieces and reassembled. Yeah, how much do you want? I can summarize, I can analyze, I can take it apart and put it together. You want 150 words, 200 words? How much in your summary? Whereas the non-Westerner has difficulty, more difficulty in taking things apart and making a summary of a picture. And that's where I found they struggled with that. And I was asking them to do something that their cognitive processing mode did not allow. Back to summing up these characteristics is that what we're looking at is cognitive characteristics that can affect our critical thinking, or what is called critical thinking. This is the second series of Chapter 2 on culture. We're Tim and Holly. If you'd like to communicate with us, there's the information there, the email, thn.academia@gmail.com, or at our website, which is cultureworldvieworigins.net. Thanks again for accompanying me, and hope to see you in the next one.